The record, it's all about everything. When I first started, it was just about who can you fight. You know, I remember Tank Abbott, he said a great quote, "You are who you fight," you know, and I still believe that way. I like to fight all the best, and you know, this is another opportunity.
Do you feel like you made the most of your career, you know, because I remember talking to you time, you said you wanted to hold all the titles at one point and everything. Do you feel like even though you're one of a few guys to win titles in multiple divisions and everything you've done, as talented as you were back in the day, do you think you made everything out of that talent?
You know, to me, myself personally, I've enjoyed my career very much, and of course there has been ups and downs, but I got no regrets.
Do you spend much time looking back?
Not much, actually. The last few years, you know, not that it has been some bad years. I only look forward. I only look to, you know, green pastures and blue skies.
BJ, I remember talking to you years ago, and you had said, we were talking about weight jumps. I'm going to go up and beat St. Pierre, take his belt. Then I'm going to go up and beat Anderson, take his belt. Then I'm going to go take Tim Sylvia's belt. You remember you were all about, your braggadocio was in full effect, so to speak.
Yes.
6, 7 years later, 8 years later, whatever, what are the differences between this BJ Penn and that BJ Penn? What have you learned in that time?
You know, I've learned, I don't know what I've learned, you know, but you know, I've had a lot of experiences throughout those times, and with that, you know, I look at the sport as the same it always was, and you know, I think it bothers people more than it bothers me, the way my career went. You know, if they want to go to sleep at night better, just know that I'm a happy man, and life's good for me.
Would you have any advice for that old BJ Penn if you could get in your DeLorean and jump back with Doc Brown a few years ago and be like, yo, BJ, here's the advice I would give you now from the older prodigy?
If I would have some advice for that older BJ Penn, there was really nothing I could do back then. The way the sport is now, I can go out and get a coach for a certain thing and go and do this. I can, you know, you got all these good coaches now. You got the Dolces, you got all these different people out there that we just didn't have back then to, you know, make sure that I was peaked or whatever they call that, and right on balance. But you know, it's just the way life, it is what it is.
When do you think that you were the most dangerous that you ever been? Like, when was your peak as a fighter?
25 years old. I think around there. You know, I was tough. I wasn't afraid. I was too stupid to know I was going to get hurt. You know, I saw them talking about, you know, BJ and Bruce Lee and this and that. I said, if I was 25 years old, let's see what would happen.
And you know, you were one of the few guys back in the day, you know, you had high-level boxing, you had high-level jiu-jitsu. Most guys were one-dimensional at that time. And yet it took you a long time to even become the champion, right? I mean, you know, why was that? Why weren't, with the multiple skills that you had, you were able to win a championship earlier?
I made mistakes. I didn't know how to train properly, and it always is going to come back to you train too much or you train too little. People will always say BJ Penn trained too little. No one will ever see BJ Penn go in there, gas out, and say he didn't rest himself enough. He didn't rest enough. But as the time goes on in the sport and people start to see and get more educated, they're going to realize, you know, in the future, like, oh, look at him, he overtrained that moron, or look at him, he's obviously undertrained. You know, I think people are going to realize that as time goes on, as the fans get more educated. I always knew the steroids was around, but now I always wondered if it was a myth with all this HGH and the EPO stuff, and now it's come out to light that this stuff is actually there and people are actually using it. People you don't expect to be using it, you know? So I mean, with that said, you don't know who was on anything. This is a sport like anything else, and for these people, although it is straight up nothing different than stealing, it's the end justifies the means for these guys. So who am I to say anything, I guess, you know?
Well, don't you think it's, you know, the UFC's fault that the UFC should have done something to step in, and you were one of the few guys that were speaking out for a long time. Shouldn't the UFC as a company have done more than they did over the last couple of years?
I think you know, that's the past, and there's nothing I can do about that. And it's great, but it is great to see the UFC stepping up now, like you're talking about.
During your time, no one ever tried to tempt you to do any of that stuff?
A few times people have talked to me and asked me about it. I said, what? And then they say, oh, so-and-so's on and so-and-so's on. And I go, really? And this and that, but I don't know why I never got into it. I don't know what it was. Either I missed the boat and then I talked too much crap about it to go on it later. That could have been what happened. Yeah, coaching the second time, whether you like it or not, the real fact of the matter is it's a lot of work. And if you don't put that work in, you shouldn't be there coaching. But it's a lot of work.
Did this season go smoother than the first?
This season was just as much work because the guys are there in the house. They want to get out of the house, and if you got to have a heart to hang out with them, you know, and take care of them. When a fighter's about to have a fight, he'll listen to anybody. He'll listen to the devil, you know. So you got to go and take care of your guys.
Do you have any thoughts
what would you change about the show if you could change a few things?
I'd let the guys out of the house, and I'd say, if you lose, you can't leave the house anymore.
BJ, did you have any thoughts on Dana's comments on kind of how the season went, how it was kind of boring and how he wasn't too pleased with it? And even into the finale, he was saying basically, you know, even the winner might not be in the best standing. Like this is a, you know, it wasn't the best season, I guess.
You know, it was a slower season actually, and from what I hear, the ratings really showed that it was a slower season, and Dana was right. People, by nature of having a tournament situation, and by the nature of people being so much more experienced and realize what's going on, you know, it was a slow show when it comes to the fights. And I was telling them, you want Dana to come, right? You're here to get Dana's eye. That's why you're in the UFC, you know, to get the top guy's eye, and that's part of the game.
I'm glad you kind of brought up the grueling nature of the tournament because the winner has to fight 3 times within 6 weeks. They're basically on a constant weight cut. Do you think the training is a little, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not really needed, right? Like you can really overwork yourself on a show like that.
Now on the second time during the show, you better be very, very careful. Anyone who's coming into the Ultimate Fighter show, if you're gonna think you're gonna go do 2 workouts a day, you know, you better shoot for 1.